Hello and welcome to the Cross to Bear podcast. I'm Phil Bair. I'm your host normally, but today I'm going to have my kind of de facto co-host quite often, Dale Glover. I'm going to have him pretty much kind of MC the conversation. We're going to be joined hopefully soon by a guest from the Atheist platform to discuss this subject matter. And so let me bring Dale on and say hello and greetings to Dale. And then Dale, you can
Hello.
unmute yourself and I'm just going to turn it over to you and let you introduce our topic. And we can make some preliminary comments about it while we're waiting for David to come on. Take
Yeah.
it away, Dale.
Yeah. Thanks for. I don't know whose show this is right now. So thank you, Phil, for at least agreeing to do this. What was supposed to be kind of a debate or discussion with David Johnson, and Phil, you picked the topic that basically under naturalism and atheism, knowledge is impossible, and it's impossible to be rational. And you and David were going to be talking about that. Now, I just received an email from David Johnson. So that's not going to be happening. He says he got the days mixed up. He thought it was tomorrow, and he's not at home right now. So he just says, I'll have to catch you next time.
Okay.
I don't know what would you like to do? Do you just do it between you and me, I guess, today for a little bit and
Well, I think, yeah, we can talk about the issues, and so we could do a follow up with David when he's available. So that's not a problem. But I would like to just at least cover the issue, and this is, by the way, this is kind of a recurring issue in Christian apologetics, but it's also a recurring issue in theism versus atheism in general, because it's not necessarily a Christian issue. It's a rational issue that focuses on worldviews and what the implications of those worldviews are in terms of epistemic reliability and epistemology. And there are several scholars and thinkers who have actually presented this kind of problem and this argument. And they include Alvin Plantinga with his evolutionary argument against naturalism. They include Dr. Tim Stratton, who's a good friend of mine, with his free thinking argument. It includes Jim Slagle, who wrote a book called The Epistemological Skyhook. And it also includes C.S. Lewis, as well as J.P. Moreland. You know, I mean, there's a host of philosophers and thinkers who have brought up this problem in some form. There are lots of variations to the problem and to the argument. And I present another variant in my book, Machines Don't Laugh. And my presentation of this problem and of this argument is slightly different than the other presentations and the other formulations that I have read about, but they all belong pretty much to the same family of arguments that focus on a very specific problem. And if you want to express what that problem is, then I would say feel free. But if you would like me to state the problem and the argument, I can do so as well. So I'm just going to give you the option here because, I want you to make a contribution here. So would you like to state it?
Yeah, so I agree ontologically speaking that God, I'm a divine conceptualist, and I think that everything is grounded in one way or another in God, and therefore God is the source of all knowledge. And without Him being involved in the process, it's impossible for human beings to have knowledge. And on an epistemic level, once you realize that ontological connection, I then think it's impossible for atheists to ever have knowledge defined as a warranted true belief, because they can never be warranted. They know there's an epistemic gap. Now, that said, I do think there are atheists that do have knowledge, but the only reason they have knowledge is because they're ignorant of this epistemic gap. And if that's the case, then they could be warranted and have a warranted true belief and have knowledge. So yeah, like that's the way I sort of see it in a nutshell. Is once you expose the problem of the epistemic gap, the atheist or naturalist can never ever have knowledge for anything. But until they see that it is possible. So yeah, I don't know if you agree on that or what's your take.
Yeah, and it really the problem extends to all of humanity because if God does not exist in reality, then human epistemology is impossible. And that means that it's impossible for all of us. So it's not just the atheist that can't have knowledge. I can't have knowledge either if God does not exist. And the way that I frame this is, and the way that a lot of thinkers have framed it, is that there are only two options when it comes to belief in God and belief in the nature of the universe. There is theism and there is naturalism. Now, those are not the only two worldview options, because I think there are four basic worldviews and only four. But if someone rejects belief in God and says, and denies that God exists, then what they are left with is some variant of naturalism. And there are a lot of variants in naturalism. But naturalism ultimately says that the natural world governed by natural law is all that exists. And that means that there is no such thing as a supernatural being, a supernatural cause, or a supernatural event. None of those things can exist under naturalism. Natural law is all that exists. The natural world is all that exists, and it's governed by natural law, and it cannot be otherwise. There cannot be any supernatural reality in all of existence. And so what that means is that if natural law is the only causation that operates in all of reality, then natural law is the cause of all of our beliefs. Well, if natural law is the cause of all of our beliefs, then it follows that natural law is the cause of all of our false beliefs. And if natural law is the cause of our false beliefs, then it is impossible for us to know whether any given belief that we have is true or false, because we don't have those beliefs because we arrived at them through some kind of natural or not rational process. We arrived at those beliefs because we were caused to arrive at those natural beliefs by natural law. Natural law is what causes our beliefs. And so, therefore, it's impossible to know whether any given belief that we have is true or false, because it was caused by something outside of ourselves, something external to us. And if we can't trust any of our beliefs because they have been caused by an external source, then human epistemology is absolutely impossible. And so there are different appeals that sometimes atheists will make in order to escape this problem. And they will appeal to something like evidential, not evidential, but emergentism. I don't know if that's a word, but there's the emergent property. Yeah, the emergent property view says that rationality is a product of complex physical systems, that it emerges out of complex physical systems, and that it is a property of that complexity. And now that's a very crude way of stating it, but that's essentially what the emergent property view is. And emergentism, I think, is the shorthand for it, although that seems like a rather awkward term for me. But anyway, but the problem is that when someone articulates, let's say, the emergent property view as an alternative to naturalism, all they're saying is that this is the way the world behaves. This is the way the natural world behaves. So complex physical systems produce rationality. And all you're saying is that rationality is caused by natural law. And so you really haven't departed from naturalism at that point. You're simply it's like you live in a big apartment complex and you live in a building and you don't like the apartment that you're living in, so you're going to move to another apartment. Well, you're still in the same building. And that the same thing is true with naturalism and the emergent property view, for example. The emergent property view is in the same building as naturalism. It's just a different apartment. Just because the physical laws that are producing your beliefs are not physical, are not physics, and like the laws of physics or the laws of chemistry, doesn't mean that they aren't laws at all. There's still some kind of law that is operating in the natural world that produces your rationality or your sensation of rationality, and therefore supposedly produces your knowledge. Well, it can't. It is all under the same umbrella of naturalism. The same is true with Platonism, because some people say, well, I don't believe in naturalism, I believe in Platonism. I believe that there are forms, there are abstract metaphysical forms that exist out there that are not part of the material world. And so they think that that means that they can escape from naturalism. Well, those abstract metaphysical forms still exist within the natural world because they're not calling them supernatural. They're simply saying that these are part of the world that exists, and they still have some kind of causation. Otherwise, you would have to say that abstract metaphysical forms out there can actually produce rationality or cause rationality in some way. And that's usually not a part of the whole Platonism philosophy. But if someone wants to invoke that philosophy as a metaphysical process, then they're still appealing to some kind of a law that exists within the universe, and they're still rejecting supernatural processes because they reject the supernatural by definition. And so I don't think that you can appeal to Platonism. I don't think you can appeal to the emergent property view. And sometimes they will appeal to brute facts. They'll say, well, rationality is just a brute fact. It's just the way the world behaves, just the way the universe operates. This is the way the universe works. But as soon as you say this is the way the universe behaves, you're talking about some kind of natural law. If you're saying that the supernatural doesn't exist, but this is the way the universe behaves as a brute fact, then you're still appealing to natural law. You haven't escaped the whole sphere of naturalism at that point. So that's why I maintain that there are only two options as far as your basic worldview is concerned when it comes to the existence of God. If God does not exist, then you're stuck with naturalism in some form. And there may be exotic forms of naturalism, but they are still naturalism at the end of the day. And I don't think anyone can ever escape that as long as they reject the concept of the supernatural. So you can comment on that and poke holes in what I just said if you want to. That's what I like about you, Dale, is that having you on as kind of an unofficial co-host is that you don't always agree with me. And that's good for me. It keeps me honest. You're not just a yes man or an echo chamber. So you may want to poke holes in what I've said, and if you do, then I welcome that. So go ahead. So give me your commentary and give me your feedback.
Well, yeah. So what I was gonna say is I think the plan of action that we could do today is because I know the way I'm making an assumption here, and maybe I'm wrong in this, but I know when you kind of discuss with an interlocutor, like a debate partner like Juan or David here, who was supposed to be here, You usually are pretty good in terms of presenting arguments in standard form, like with premises and stuff. So I'm just kind of curious, did you do that? Did you make sort of premised arguments for your discussion with David? And if you did, maybe we could take each one of those one step at a time and discuss each argument. Did you do anything like that, or?
What you mean, discuss each premise?
Yeah, well, each argument individually, and then if you put it in premise format and stuff. So
yeah, well, I do have a formalized argument, but I don't have it readily available. I'm going to have to go find it, and then I would have to present it on the screen. So if you can just bear with me for a second, I can go grab it. And I'll grab it out of my book, Machines Don't Laugh.
Okay. And while you're doing that, while you're pulling that up, I guess just to start, before we've kind of just been diving into the deep end of the pool and stuff, but I guess for the audience, it could be important to say, what is knowledge? Some people might not know. And on that front, Phil and I do have a difference of opinion. So Phil kind of from my understanding, and he'll correct me if I'm wrong, but he takes a sort of traditional view that knowledge is what's called a justified true belief. So you have a belief and it's true, and it has this epistemic factor of justification. You're rationally justified in believing it. You've got good reasons to think that it is a true belief. If you have that justified true belief, that is tantamount to having knowledge. Me, on the other hand, and some philosophers, this really came about in the 1960s with a guy named Edmund Gettier, who kind of challenged this traditional view that held for thousands of years and said, actually, no, justified true belief is not good enough for knowledge. It's insufficient because there are examples, so he claims, of justified true belief whereby we don't have knowledge. So for an example, this is one of Gettier's counterexamples, is you could stare at a broken clock and it may be the right time. It's stuck on 2:00, and guess what? It's true. It is in fact 2:00, but it's a broken clock. So you would be rationally justified because when you look at clocks, they reliably tell you what time it is and stuff like that. But actually you don't have knowledge unbeknownst to you. Kind of thing. That's one alleged counterexample. And because of that, other people have swapped in alternatives. And that's where I come in. So I think knowledge is a warranted true belief. It's warrant that converts that. And I take Alvin Plantinga's definition of that, right? So it's kind of basically it's a belief true belief that's produced by a set of faculties functioning properly in a suitable cognitive environment for those faculties, whereby those faculties have been successfully designed, quote unquote designed, to produce true beliefs. So I believe I got the definition right there. So just in a nutshell, just so the audience understands, that's what knowledge is. And there is a debate on that front, and Phil and I have different views as to what it is. But is that good enough? Did you want me to describe other views on knowledge, or?
No, if you and I disagree on anything like that, then my default position is that I'm right and you're wrong, pretty much. So
you have the same default position as me.
So you have the default position that if we disagree, Phil is right?
Yeah, my default is whenever I disagree with anyone, I just assume I'm wrong. And
okay, well then we do have the same position. Yeah.
Good stuff.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you an excerpt from my book, Calvin's Desperation, because I address the definition of knowledge and the problem of knowledge in Calvin's Desperation. Because my central thesis that runs throughout my books and runs throughout my philosophy is that determinism destroys knowledge. And if scientific determinism is true, in other words, if naturalism is true, then scientific determinism is true. And if determinism is true, then knowledge is impossible. Now, it doesn't matter what flavor of determinism you're looking at any given moment. Any flavor of determinism destroys knowledge, whether it's scientific or naturalistic determinism or materialistic determinism, another word for it, or theistic determinism. All kinds of determinism destroy knowledge. In other words, if our beliefs are determined by antecedent conditions, as Tim Stratton would put it, then it is impossible to know whether or not any of our beliefs are true or false. And if it's impossible to know that any of our beliefs are true or false, then knowledge is impossible. So the problem is determinism. And that's where the problem with naturalism occurs, because naturalism involves determinism by definition. And so someone will come along and they'll say, wait a minute, you're defining knowledge as justified true belief, but there are other theories of knowledge that might survive determinism. And if that's the case, then we need to address those other theories of knowledge and see whether or not determinism destroys those as well. And so that's why I wrote the following excerpt in my book, Calvin's Desperation. And you might think that's kind of an odd place for it to be, because Machines Don't Laugh is where I focus on naturalism and knowledge. But since I focus on knowledge under determinism in general, then it has a place in my discussion of Calvinism, because Calvinism is essentially theistic determinism dressed up in theological language. So what I'm going to do is, if you don't mind, Dale, I'm going to share this with you because this is very important.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's a little long.
Are you sharing your screen as well, or
no? I'm just. Now, if you want, I could.
I think it's good. It would help the audience just to read along with you as well. If it's a long thing. Yeah.
All right. Okay, let me see what I can do here. I think if that's the case, I'm going to have to go to the PDF version. And I appreciate the audience being patient with me here. This isn't something that I actually planned to do. So
no problem. I'll keep the audience occupied. So hey, Ringo Cat, I can't respond in the comments, so we're using Phil's restream. So I'll just say good evening to you, Ringo, and good to see you over here from Scotland, and also Juan from Modern Atheism's here. Phil, your good buddy. So he says hello, Phil and Dale. So he's watching us bumble along and stuff. So just so you know, Juan, if you just got here. Unfortunately, David Johnson got the dates mixed up. He thought we were doing this tomorrow, so he has no way of joining, kind of thing and stuff. So me and Phil are just kind of doing our best to just discuss stuff without him on this issue. So sorry.
We're muddling through.
And
okay,
guess who else is here, Phil? Last thing I'll say. Your partner, because Phil, we're doing another show on Saturday, and you're going to be discussing with Professor Tavo Sanabri. So he's in the chat, and he says hello as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's here.
Hey, I just noticed that. Hey, Tavo, how are you? And it's good to have you here. It's good to have Juan here also. So hello, Juan, and then also hello, Ringo Cat. And I'm glad you guys joined us, and it's a pleasure to have you. So, yeah, and I really like Juan a lot. You know that, Dale. I've always talked about how the kind of admiration I have for Juan. I just think he's a great guy, and Yeah, he's open-minded and humble, and he's just a
Funny
genuine
thing,
guy. So I
but the
like him.
funny thing is, you only ever say that on camera. Behind the scenes, you say a completely different thing. That's a secret. Sorry, yeah. Sorry, guys. My humor is bad. While we were waiting for Phil to bring up his argument, yeah. So Tavo, again, I don't know if you were how long you've been here and what you know, but yeah, it's basically we're talking about naturalism and whether knowledge is even possible under naturalism. And Phil has his own particular argument as to why he says no. And basically, he says naturalism entails determinism, and if you're determined, you can't have knowledge. So that's what he's trying to bring up right now. As I'm blabbing and wasting time speaking to you, he's trying to bring up his argument to read to us in a premise format.
Okay, so this is not letting me.
Okay, that's okay. Just read it then. That's fine.
I'm going to try a different approach.
Okay. Geez, I'm really bad at throwing shows off track. Yesterday, I was on Mike Lacona's podcast speaking about the Shroud, and towards the end, he everything was flowing great, and towards the end, he was kind of like, "Okay, now Dale, do you have like a final thing to say?" And I'm like, "Well, you know what, Mike, I actually have a question I want to ask you as a biblical scholar," and I was sort of asking him about the one of the shroud images are claimed to be mentioned in Galatians 3:1. This is according to some pro-shroud scholars, and I wanted to get Mike's opinion because he has a PhD in New Testament studies. So I wanted to see, do you think this is crazy? Do you think there's something to it? But yeah, I kind of threw things off because he wasn't expecting me to ask him a question on the show. So looks like I'm throwing things off with you now as well by getting you to post us.
Okay, so let me read this real quick because I think it'll be important to read this because this is really the clearest way that I could state it, and so I think it's going to be helpful, even though it's going to be a little long. Okay, I'll try to get through it as quickly as I can. It says, this is what I wrote in Calvin's Desperation. It says, there's one issue we must address as it relates to how total the destruction of knowledge is under determinism. Alvin Plantinga proposed the existence of two categories of knowledge, justified true belief and warranted true belief. Justified true belief is just what it sounds like. What is believed to be true is established by an argument that rationally justifies the truth of the conclusion. Warranted true belief relies on whether a belief is warranted as opposed to justified. So what is this idea Plantinga calls warrant? To understand warrant, he argues that we must invoke a concept he calls proper function. According to Plantinga, all other theories designed to support the concept of warrant fail. He develops, redefines, and defends the concept of proper function in the first two chapters of Warrant and Proper Function. Imagine that, the name of the book. He summarizes proper function like this. As I see it, a belief has warrant if it is produced by cognitive faculties functioning properly, subject to no malfunctioning, in a cognitive environment congenial for those faculties, according to a design plan successfully aimed at truth, and subject to no defeaters. He actually adds a couple more details later, and there are some variations on that, pretty much on that formula, but that's essentially what the idea of warranted true belief is about, based on proper function. So whether Plantinga is ultimately successful in establishing the validity of warrant is not my concern here. The point to be made instead is if warrant is a sound theory and a proper path to authentic human knowledge, is it immune to the poisonous venom of determinism? So let me state that again. The point to be made here is if warrant is a sound theory and a proper path to authentic human knowledge, is it immune to the poisonous venom of determinism? Now, exhaustive determinism in all its forms, materialistic, theistic, or otherwise, destroys justified true belief leading to knowledge. Recall that under this version of determinism, exhaustive, all our thoughts, beliefs, and judgments are determined by an untrustworthy antecedent causal agency. As such, it is impossible to know whether any of our beliefs are true. It's possible they are only false ideas we have been causally determined to believe. They could be true, but there is no way that we can know they are true, since the reason we believe them has nothing to do with whether they are true or false. Another way to say it is, we have no way of knowing whether they are justified, since it's impossible to know whether our cognitive faculties, which are causally determined to believe exist and are functioning properly, are able to rationally infer and justify them. Under determinism, we are causally determined to believe we have functioning cognitive faculties, and that belief could be a deception. We need those cognitive faculties to be able to analyze a logical syllogism to discover whether or not it is a sound argument. Then we need the libertarian freedom to accept the conclusion, that is, to obey the rules of inference. If we are merely being determined to believe those faculties are operating correctly, we can't be sure they are, and therefore we cannot trust the knowledge they putatively justify. So I repeat my earlier observation that determinism destroys knowledge that we believe is gained through rationally justified inference. We have no way of knowing inference is even occurring, since we are being unalterably caused to believe that it is. Okay, so far so good? But
Yep.
does determinism destroy warranted belief as well? In other words, does determinism destroy all knowledge, justified and warranted, or just some knowledge, justified only? If it leaves warrant untouched, then it may not destroy all knowledge, and my argument about the impossibility of a successful epistemology under determinism is in jeopardy. Now, the only way we can know there is such a thing as warrant is if we can infer that the concept is true and valid. So there must be an argument or series of them available to us that will establish warranted belief as something valid and real. I am not referring now to the beliefs that are said to be warranted. I'm referring instead to the supporting arguments that establish the validity of the theory of warrant itself. According to Plantinga, the following conditions must be met for warrant to be trustworthy. 1, we must possess properly functioning cognitive faculties. 2, there must be a cognitive environment congenial to those faculties. 3, the above environment must operate according to a design plan successfully aimed at truth. For those conditions to be met, we must be able to know that they are being met. Okay, let me say that again. This is very important. For those conditions to be met, we must be able to know that they are being met. We must be able to know that we possess properly functioning cognitive faculties. Why? Because if we don't know we possess properly functioning cognitive faculties, we have no way of knowing they're giving us authentic knowledge, and we would have no way of knowing they are functioning properly. We must be able to know that the congenial cognitive environment exists, and we must be able to know that the environment is able to operate according to a design plan successfully aimed at truth. In other words, there must be rational arguments that establish the existence of all those conditions. We can't merely assume them for no reason. If we don't know that these conditions exist, it's impossible to know that warrant is a sound methodology that can yield authentic knowledge. Now, what is the nature of those arguments? Is each argument a set of rationally justified propositions arranged as premises leading to a conclusion? If so, the idea that warranted belief is a real form of authentic knowledge must be supported by rational justification. If not, there's no justification for the concept of warrant, and we are left with only two remaining possibilities. 1, warrant is something we believe in with no evidence that it is sound. 2, the theory of warrant is established by other warranted beliefs. To reduce this option to its essential form, the concept of warrant itself is ultimately a warranted belief. Now, option 1 above is a matter of accepting a theory by blind faith and is therefore a brilliant example of begging the question. We have no reason to accept warrant other than a vacuous desire for it to be true. This means it is utterly unworthy of our credence, and the only respectable thing to do is to refuse to give it any. We must also remember that if determinism is true, those who believe in warrant are being causally determined to do so. Option 2 above is also question begging, since it relies on warranted belief for the theory to be sound. In other words, if any of the premises of the arguments establishing warranted belief are themselves examples of warranted beliefs, the argumentation for warrant is hopelessly circular. Therefore, the theory and the conditions of warranted belief must be rationally justified. That is our only remaining rational option. In other words, rational justification is necessary for warrant itself to be rational and sound. If it isn't, and if Plantinga fails to support his theory of warrant with arguments that justify it, he has failed to establish warrant with anything other than question-begging presuppositions. So we cannot dismiss the role of rational justification for warrant to be a sound theory of knowledge. But we have already established that determinism destroys the possibility of rational justification. Since the truth and validity of warrant requires rational justification, once determinism destroys rational justification, it automatically destroys warrant along with it. Also notice that under determinism, we are being causally determined to believe we have functioning cognitive faculties that are capable of arriving at justified true beliefs. But we have no way to verify the existence or the function of these cognitive faculties under determinism. If that's true, and it's inescapable, determinism destroys warrant as well, since it relies heavily on the condition that we possess functioning cognitive faculties, just like justification does. So we can formulate the argument like this. 1. Warrant must be rationally justified to avoid being circular. 2. Determinism defeats rational justification. 3. Therefore, determinism defeats warrant. The above point applies to all the conditions warrant requires. Under determinism, we are causally determined to believe there's a cognitive environment congenial to our cognitive faculties. As such, it's impossible to know that such an environment exists. Under determinism, we are also causally determined to believe this environment operates according to a design plan successfully aimed at truth. Therefore, we cannot know that either. But we must be able to know that these conditions exist in order to know that warrant is a valid theory of knowledge. Since we don't, we have arrested warrant and put it in the same cell with all other kinds of knowledge anyone can conceive. And by the way, I named this section Arrest Warrant. So, isn't that cute? Another observation that we must make is that if all our beliefs are causally determined, then this must include 1, our belief that the two categories of human knowledge we think we have examined in fact exist, and 2, our belief that we have in fact examined them. Under determinism, we are being causally determined to believe there is a subcategory of knowledge that is unaffected by it. But how can we know this is true if we are only being causally determined to believe it? We can't know it's true any more than we can know anything else, and we are being causally determined to believe is true. The only way we could know that there's such a thing as warrant would be to have the ability to escape the world we are living in and objectively observe it from the outside looking in. Since that is impossible, we have no way of conducting an objective analysis of the nature of knowledge as external observers. We can wonder if authentic knowledge can exist in another possible world where determinism is true and all thinking beings are causally determined to believe only true propositions. But we live in the actual world, not another possible world. Therefore, what may occur in another possible world is irrelevant and meaningless. And since we cannot escape this world, the idea that determinism is true in this world removes all hope of knowing that any of our beliefs are true, regardless of whether they are supposedly justified or warranted. The essential thesis in regard to this is, aside from rational justification, no theory of knowledge can justify itself. If it could, the basis for it would be circular and unworthy of our credence. You cannot use theory T to establish that theory T is sound without begging the question. Rational justification is the exception, since it relies directly on the laws of logic and the rules of inference for its validity. Therefore, all theories of knowledge apart from rational justification must be rationally justified. If determinism destroys all rational justification, it automatically destroys all other theories of knowledge as well, because they all must rely on rational justification to be sound. So we can reformulate the above argument like this. 1, T must be rationally justified to avoid being circular. 2, determinism defeats rational justification. 3. Therefore, determinism defeats T, where T equals any theory of knowledge anyone could propose apart from rational justification. Now, I have a little diagram here where it says rational justification must support all additional theories of knowledge like this. And I have T1, T2, T3, and Tn all on a line horizontally. Then there's a horizontal line, and then below that is rational justification, or RJ, where rational justification supports all T1, T2, T3, and Tn. So that's where T equals any theory of knowledge, RJ equals rational justification. And if you destroy rational justification in the above system, everything it supports, T1 through Tn, collapses. No theory of knowledge is left standing. The only conclusion we can come to, therefore, is that determinism doesn't just destroy some knowledge, it destroys all of it, regardless of what theory of knowledge it belongs to. There's no species of human knowledge left once determinism unleashes its fury on the epistemological ecosystem. It is an indiscriminate predator. It doesn't care what species it is about to devour. So the effort to differentiate between multiple ways of knowing does not solve the fatal epistemological problem determinism poses. Therefore, everything we have already observed about determinism and knowledge remains intact. If determinism is true, knowledge is still utterly and completely impossible. So thank you for getting through all of that.
Mm-hmm. I've been writing notes furiously.
Yeah, I hope that was helpful. And if you can spot anything in there that needs to be challenged, then please do so. But before you do that,
I have two.
I was going to comment on this theory of knowledge that this philosopher that you brought up had, and that was that justified true belief is not sufficient for knowledge. And the example that you brought up was looking at a clock that says 2 o'clock, and that you have a justified true belief that it's 2 o'clock. But that's not knowledge. And the reason is that it's not 2 o'clock because you're looking at a broken clock. And my reply to that would be, but that is not an example of justified true belief. That example is a justified false belief. And so it doesn't count in the assessment of whether or not justified true belief is the sufficient definition for knowledge. So take it away, Dale. And thanks for listening.
Okay, so I got 3 things to say. I'll start with the last thing. No, it's a justified true belief because the belief in question is what is the time. And it's true that it's 2 p.m. Kind of thing, right? So he's got a good reasons for doing so. He's justified. And it's a true belief that it is 2 p.m. But yet, at the same time, we don't want to say that's insufficient for saying he has knowledge that it's 2 p.m. So does that make sense? Like the belief in question is the time. Yeah.
Well, I guess I was bringing up the example of it's actually 1 o'clock, but the clock says 2 o'clock. And so if the example is it's 2 o'clock and the clock says 2 o'clock, but it's a broken clock, then it is a true belief, but it's not a justified true belief because you're looking at a broken clock. The only way to justify the belief that it's 2 o'clock is to know that the clock is functioning properly. To know the clock is right, know the clock is accurate, to know the clock is not broken. That's the only way that you could have a justified true belief that it's 2 o'clock. If you don't know that the clock is not a broken clock, then it is not a justified belief, even if it's a true belief.
Yeah, fair enough. And in fairness, there are different strategies to the get here counter examples that I raise. One of them is doubling down on justified true belief and just saying, well, in somehow, some way, these are not examples of justified true belief. I guess I'll just ask one follow-up on this, and then I'll move on. But how would you respond? So I hear what you're saying. Well, he's not justified. In order to be justified and have good reason, he should determine that the clock is not broken first, or something like that. Like he has an added onus to be justified there. The only
Right.
problem is, I think, in our experience in everyday life, we do say we have knowledge. When I look at the clock, when I looked at the clock to come on here to do the show with you, I didn't check to make sure the clock was broken, but I still had knowledge that it was 1 o'clock. It's time to get my butt into the studio and do the show with Phil. So would you say I was unjustified in coming on to Restream just because I looked at the clock and it said 1 o'clock and I believed it or something? Or
No, I think it's easy to confuse a justified decision with a justified true belief, because I can justify the decision to come on the show on time by looking at my watch, and the reason that I'm justified in my decision to act on my belief that it's becoming time to do the show is that there is an extremely high probability that my watch is not broken. And so I don't have, if I just look at my watch and it says 11:50 a.m. Denver time, I don't know that it's 11:50. I have a high probability that it's 11:50, and that probability is enough for me to function in everyday life. In other words, the stakes are not high in that decision. And so I don't need justified true belief that it's 11:50 just from looking at my watch, because I'm not staking my life on it. I'm simply making a practical decision on that part, and that decision is justified. That doesn't mean that my belief that it's 11:50 is justified. My belief that it's 11:50 is highly probable, and that's all I need to make decisions in everyday life. Now, if I discover that my watch is not working, that my watch is broken, then that's a different story. And if I discover that my watch is broken, then I've also discovered that my belief that it was a certain time when I looked at it was not justified, but it was highly probable, and highly probable is enough for me because the stakes are so low.
okay, so I'll just say this so that you rate. I didn't expect you to say that, so I'll just give my opinion then. So I totally disagree with what you said. In this example, I would say you don't have any. It's not highly probable on the basis that the practical stakes are irrelevant. I don't go for. It sounds like you're kind of going for pragmatic encroachment theory a bit. And I don't think that matters at all. It's just, do you have sufficient evidence for? Because I'm a pure evidentialist. That's just me, the position I take. And the evidence itself, I didn't hear where you have any evidence that makes it highly probable, because past experience doesn't matter. When a watch breaks, it can break at any time and stop functioning. So unless you've taken measures to maybe double check and look at other clocks and synchronize, like that's the only way you could say, well, if I've looked at 3 clocks and they all say 2 o'clock, it's more probable than not that it's 2 o'clock, because the odds are, these 3 clocks wouldn't all be broken when I knew they were all functioning fine this morning or something like that. Like that's what I would look for justification there. And I don't think the practical stakes matter at all. Like we just need sufficient evidence. Does that make sense?
So my question then would be, what impact does that have on the discussion about epistemic reliability under naturalism? In other words, under determinism, how does that, the point that you're making, your evidentialist point, because you're claiming that we do have knowledge that it's 2 o'clock because, well, I have evidence that it's 2 o'clock.
Yeah.
But
I'm just getting there. Yeah, I think I'll address that with my 2 objections.
Okay, so all right. Well, because that objection alone, standing by itself, doesn't really give us a lot of traction, So go ahead and I think what you should do is combine it with any other objection that you might have.
Okay, so give them both at once. Okay, so my next objection is, I disagree with you. I don't think it's true that determinate. So for this objection, I'm assuming knowledge is a justified true belief for the sake of argument. I'm agreeing with you, and let's just go with that. I don't agree with you that determinism necessarily destroys our chance at justification. And the example I was going to give to kind of discuss with you is, look, all of God's knowledge is determined. It's fully determined. All that matters is we have to separate whether we meet the conditions of justified true belief. That's not necessary. It doesn't matter whether we are determined to have a justified true belief or whether we freely choose to have a justified true belief. All that matters is, are those conditions obtained? And if that's sufficient for knowledge, you can have a determined justified true belief. And I would point to God, who has determined justified true beliefs, and that's not an issue.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna hold that in strong dispute. God's knowledge is not determined, because the definition of determined is that antecedent conditions are sufficient to necessitate an event or an effect. And there are no antecedent conditions when it comes to God. There's nothing outside of God that causes anything, any process, or any condition in God. So God's knowledge is not determined, because for something to be determined, it has to be necessitated by antecedent conditions, and there's no such thing when it comes to God. So there's no such thing as determined knowledge with God, and therefore his knowledge is not determined, and therefore determinism does not destroy his knowledge. But we are not necessary beings like God is. There's such a thing as antecedent conditions with human beings, that where there is no such thing as antecedent conditions with God. So therefore, if our knowledge is determined, that means it's determined by antecedent conditions that are outside of ourselves or prior to ourselves. And if that's the case, then for human beings, determined beliefs destroy knowledge. Determinism destroys knowledge, because everything is determined under determinism, including our beliefs. So there's nothing external to God that determines his beliefs. That's not the way it works with God, because he's a necessary being.
Okay, so the problem, and I'm trying my best to fill in for David Johnson here, so I'll try to argue as the skeptic, since David, you bugger, you didn't show up, but it's just not true. Who said that?
So David, if you don't like it, then too bad, you should have shown up.
But yeah, so the mistake you're making is saying, well, antecedent conditions are externally determined. No, God is, they're internal. God is determined by his own nature. As I
recall, they're not antecedent.
It is, his nature is antecedent to his beliefs, I would say. His nature determines his moral belief. His morally perfect nature determines that his belief that rape is wrong.
But his moral posture is not antecedent.
It is.
It's a contradiction. No, logically, antecedent does not mean logically prior. Antecedent means antecedent. Antecedent means that they are prior to an effect, where God's knowledge is an effect of those antecedent conditions. God's knowledge is not an effect, because if God's knowledge is an effect, then something has to cause that effect, and therefore God's knowledge is derivative. It's not intrinsic to him. So we can't call anything antecedent for God. We can say that his logical nature is prior to any conclusion that could be drawn from any logical process, but that doesn't exist in God. God does not gain knowledge through derivative means. Knowledge is not discursive for God the way it is for us. So therefore, none of God's knowledge is caused by anything antecedent to him, because there isn't anything antecedent to him.
Okay. So I guess I'll point out, me and you, I remember this did come up in another show that we did, and I would just sort of disagree with that. I would take more scholars like Dr. William Lane Craig, where basically antecedent, if you have a conditional statement, an if-then statement, it just means that whatever comes before, if I jump into a pool, that's the antecedent, then I'll be wet. That's the consequent, right? So the antecedent, all it's saying is that logically speaking, this precondition is sufficient to bring about this effect. If it's true I jump into a pool, then it's true I'm wet. It's sufficient to logically make that entailment. And I would argue it's the same with God. It's God's nature determines what his moral nature, for example, determines what his moral knowledge is, kind of thing. And I get you would disagree with that. You think it's all like there is no derivation and stuff like that. But if there's for when we're talking Molinism, certainly God's middle knowledge is derivative of certain things, and his free knowledge is derivative. So that's sort of the issue, I guess, is can we think that his knowledge can derive from something else intrinsic or not? You say no, and I would say yes. Yeah.
Okay, then God is a contingent being, and if you can live with that, that's fine. But the other thing, though, that needs to be understood here is that determinism is not about self-origination for the causes of any given belief. Determinism is about antecedent conditions, conditions that are outside of us. If I know something and I arrived at that knowledge through antecedent, or not through antecedent, but through rational deliberation, then that belief and that knowledge, the cause of that knowledge originates with me. And that is the antithesis of determinism. Determinism says that something antecedent to me, outside of me, external to me, caused an internal belief in me. And if that's the case, then I cannot have any knowledge, because all of my beliefs are determined by something other than myself. And when you talk about God's knowledge is not determined by anything other than himself. That means that God's knowledge is not determined. Now, if you want to say that God's knowledge is determined by something that's prior to his knowledge, then that's a different discussion. But what's happened is that the definition of antecedent has shifted. It's become something different, and the definition, therefore, of determinism has also shifted. It's been redefined. And so what I'm talking about is human knowledge, and all human knowledge is derivative. And if it is caused by antecedent conditions, which means something outside of ourselves, then it is determined. And if if a belief is caused by something outside of ourselves, it is caused. It is not rational deliberation. It is my belief has been caused by something. And so, and it's been caused by something outside of myself, something that I have no control over. And that's why I say that if determinism is true, human knowledge is categorically impossible. And it doesn't matter whether the antecedent conditions are the will of God, or whether the antecedent conditions are the laws of nature. It doesn't matter. Anything that is caused by something external to me is determined. Anything that is determined by something that is external to me, that means that antecedent conditions are sufficient to necessitate that belief. So if that's the case, all determinism destroys knowledge, and it includes warranted belief as well as justified belief, because warrant requires justification in order to be a sound theory of knowledge that we know is a valid theory of knowledge. But it can't justify itself, therefore it has to rely on rational justification. But determinism destroys rational justification. based on the definition that I'm talking about, and that is antecedent conditions, whether they're natural law or divine will, are what cause. They're sufficient to necessitate my beliefs. In other words, when I say necessitate my beliefs, what I mean is that my beliefs could not have been.
All right. Oh, there
It's all about. Did I wink out there for a second?
Yep.
Sorry about that.
No problem. So
That's
yeah, so look, yeah, clearly we have different definitions of what determinism entails, right? So I'm using the definition, I think in the normal way most people think, right? With determinism, there's this antecedent cause that necessitates the effect, and that can include external antecedents and internal antecedents. But I take your point. Who cares about semantics? So if we're determining if determinism,
I would say an internal antecedent is a contradiction in terms.
Well, so think about compatibilists who you and I disagree with, right? They appeal and they think they avoid any external antecedents by saying, well, no, really the decision is determined by these proper internal states, my beliefs, my thoughts, my desires, these select mental states. And that's what determines my choice. And because it's these internal states, they wrongly, according to me and you, I would agree with you that, yeah, but your internal states are externally caused and necessitated by external factors. So therefore it's a problem. But
that relies on the definition of determinism that I just stated.
No, but I'm saying for them, determinism, they think that, well, because it's determined by my internal states, that's all that matters. So I'm just trying to make the point that determinism includes internal aspects as causes. Does that make sense? That's all I'm trying to say. But yeah,
okay.
Let's go with
well, so I would offer a little bit of a course correction for you there. Determinism does not rely on internal states, never relies on internal states. Determination might rely on internal states. But there's a difference between determinism and determination. Determinism is a systematic. Determination is simply an idea. That's all it is. It's the idea that something determined a particular state. That's not determinism. That's simply an expression, a description of something that has been determined as an outcome. In other words, in that definition, the word determined means could not be otherwise. But the problem is that if my internal states are what determine an idea or a belief that I hold, then they could have been otherwise, because I could have chosen a different conclusion and I could have chosen a different belief. So that means that nothing internal to me will ever determine anything, because it could have been otherwise. And if it could have been otherwise, it wasn't determined, because determined means could not have been otherwise. Now, determinism means that it could not have been otherwise, and it was caused by an external antecedent condition. And that antecedent condition is what made it so that it could not be otherwise. That's determinism. What you're describing with what the compatibilist is doing is simply determination. And not only is it only determination and not determinism per se, it's also not even determined, because if someone comes up with a belief because of their internal states, that belief could have been otherwise. And if that's the case, it wasn't determined, because determinism means at least that it could not be otherwise. And well, the determination means that it could not be otherwise. And determinism is a systematic that says external antecedent conditions necessitate my belief and necessitate all states that I have. So gotcha. Is that helpful, or does this make things more confusing?
No, I think it's very helpful. I like the distinction between determinism and determination, So yeah, clearly I'm thinking of determination as the only thing that matters. Right. So okay, now if it's, let's just focus on the external things determining I believe, like how, okay, so like how does that, even if my justified true beliefs are determined by something external, so they couldn't be other than what they were, why does that destroy my justification? Like why couldn't I be justified even if I couldn't have been unjustified? And do you know what I mean? Like I don't understand why that follows.
No, it's not that they couldn't have been unjustified, it's that they couldn't have been otherwise. That's not the same thing. So the reason that determinism destroys knowledge is because our beliefs are caused by something that it has nothing to do with truth or with what's true or false. If my beliefs are caused by the laws of physics and chemistry, then they are not caused by something that is aimed at truth. They're simply caused by a natural, impersonal, mindless, unintelligent cause and effect relationship. And a mindless, impersonal cause and effect relationship is not aimed at anything. It's not interested in causing something that's true. All it's doing is it's simply causing a belief as an effect of a law of nature. And the effects of laws of nature, you cannot know whether an effective law of nature is true or false, because the laws of nature, they're not, that's not something they can do. They cannot aim a belief, they can't aim an effect that they're causing at truth. It's just like if I program a computer to display a proposition on my screen, my programming was the cause of displaying that proposition on the screen. The computer has no idea whether or not that proposition is true or false, because it was simply caused to exist on my computer.
Okay, so I think this is good. We can make some progress here, right? So determinism has determined that
finally
that my sunglasses are here on the desk, right? You would agree with that under the naturalism paradigm. One thing led to another externally to these external sunglasses here on my desk, or my pen on my desk, or something like that. They cause me to form a justified true belief. You know, they make an impact on my brain, and my brain does a bunch of stuff, and I come up. Now, what you're saying, if I understand here, is that but your brain involved in the process was externally caused through evolutionary processes, and these processes are not aimed at producing true beliefs necessarily.
Okay, but I need to stop you there real quick.
Okay.
Natural law did not cause you to have a justified true belief that your sunglasses are on the table. If you say natural law caused me to have a justified true belief, you're contradicting yourself, because a justified true belief cannot be a caused true belief. You cannot have cause and justification at the same time. You either have cause or you have justification. In other words, you either have an external cause or you have the justification, but you cannot have both. If your belief is caused by natural law, it is not justified. And if a belief is justified through rational means, through rational deliberation by an agent, a rational agent, then it wasn't caused. In other words, it wasn't caused by something external. You could say that it was caused by something internal, but it was not determined by something internal. The explanation for your belief that the sunglasses are sitting on the table, if it's justified, the explanation is that you rationally deliberated based on evidence, and then you arrived at at the conclusion that your sunglasses are sitting on the table, and that is a justified true belief that your sunglasses are sitting on the table in front of you. But that belief is not caused by something outside of yourself. And so when we're talking about naturalism, we're talking about external causes that are causing your beliefs, and nothing can cause a justified true belief that is outside of you, because that's a contradiction. That's a contradiction by definition. It's not a contradiction empirically, it's a contradiction by definition.
Well, yes, I just disagree. So I would say this is the way I see it, just to keep it simple. The sunglasses cause me to have a perception. Perception serves as evidence that causes me to form a justified true belief that my pen is on the desk, or whatever it is. The sunglasses are on the desk, whatever the example is. So external things do stand in the causal chain in producing justified true belief. And I could posit that it was even determined, and I could still have, the pen on the desk determined me to have this perception that there's a pen on the desk, and that perceptual evidence determined that I would have a justified true belief. So, like, I don't see the problem, but maybe by cause you have like something that I'm not understanding. Like, maybe there's more to it in terms of what you mean.
Let me just say, with all gentleness and affection, what you're saying is circular. And here's how it's circular. You're saying that the pen sitting on the desk in front of you is what caused you to believe that the pen is sitting on the desk in front of you. But when you say the pen sitting on the desk in front of you is what caused your belief that it's sitting in front of you, you're assuming that you know that the pen exists and it's sitting on the desk in front of you. Okay, but that belief under naturalism was caused. So your belief that the pen exists and is sitting in front of you, and that it is the cause of your belief that it exists and is sitting in front of you, is determined by something outside of you. It's determined by natural law under naturalism. And so the pen might not even exist. You can't assume the pen exists and then say that it was the cause of your belief that the pen exists. That's circular.
And Phil, I want to let you continue because I want to hear your answer, and I'll give you the last word on this. But you're skipping the part about the pen causing my perception, and then my perception causing that. Does that make any difference at all, or no? I just want
No, because if you say the pen caused your perception, you're assuming that the pen exists and that it has causal powers to influence your perceptions. So it's still circular. Whether you say it caused a perception or whether you say it caused a justified true belief, the fact that you say it caused anything assumes that it exists as a pen and that it has causal power to influence either your perceptions or your beliefs or whatever it happens to be. But you don't know that pen even exists in the first place, because that would be a belief that you would have to rely on some kind of justification in order to believe it. But you don't have that. You don't have that belief to begin with, and therefore you can't start there. The idea that the pen exists and is sitting on your desk is a conclusion. It's posterior to this entire process. It's not. It can't be the basis for it, because it's one of the conclusions that would have to be drawn from this entire process of cognitive ability. And if that's the case, then you can't assume that the pen exists in order to try to say that it was the cause of your perception that the pen exists. It's all circular, no matter whether you say it was the cause of your perception or whether you say it was the cause of your knowledge.
Okay. All right. Like I said, I'll give you the last word on that, because I want to get to my final objection. So
okay.
Now I'm not going to be granting you that knowledge is a justified true belief. And you gave an objection that said, well, if knowledge is a warranted true belief, that breaks down, and you're going to have to reduce down to a justified true belief. And here's why I don't think your argument works, even though I actually might agree with you against Alvin Plantinga's understanding of warrant and how it works. So it relates to a debate in epistemology, the externalism versus internalism debate. Now, Alvin Plantinga is an externalist only. So the criterion of warrant is fully external. What that means is, do we have to know or be cognizant? The better word is, do we have to be cognizant of the fact that we have a justified true belief, or that we have a warranted true belief in order to be warranted? Do we have to know that we know, so to speak? Alvin Plantinga, under externalism, they say no, we don't have to be cognizant of the fact that my faculties are functioning properly or not. If you know, you just know. If you've got a warranted true belief, however you've gotten it, whether you were determined to get it or not, doesn't matter. You've got knowledge. Now, I would agree with Phil that is unsatisfactory. I don't think that is sufficient for knowledge. I'm an internalist, even though I agree with everything about Alvin Plantinga in terms of propositional knowledge. I think it's produced, we gain a warranted true belief. Let's just say my faculties functioning properly, they're designed by God to produce true beliefs, and I see the pen, and okay, that creates a perception, and that in turn creates a warranted true belief. Then, okay, but how am I cognizant of the fact that I got a warranted true belief? And this is where my unique answer is, it's through the qualia of knowledge. We have knowledge by acquaintance, right? Or knowledge through experience. I have experiential knowledge of what it is like to be warranted or to have a warranted true belief. And over time, I now gain knowledge by acquaintance of the fact that I have a warranted true belief on a given proposition or not. And knowledge by acquaintance, that is something I'm directly cognizant of. Now, that's something I've made up. That's my idea of how it works in a non-circular way and stuff like that. That's not Alvin Plantinga's thing. But I'm just curious, because I've kind of done that, do you think that avoids some of the pitfalls? We can maintain warrant so long as I'm including that cognizant element, that internal element.
Well, I think it's perfectly coherent, and I think it's perfectly valid. In fact, I agree that Alvin Plantinga's conditions for warranted belief are valid. I'm not interested in whether or not his theory is true or false. What I'm interested in is his theory feasible if determinism is true? And so when I say, I think we have to know that there are conditions that are conducive, whatever the first condition is. I don't remember how it's actually stated. If you can refresh my memory, do so.
Yeah, it's a belief. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
What's the first?
A belief caused by a set of faculties. He says
okay, so you have a set of faculties that are conducive or
that are functioning properly.
Functioning properly. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that we have to know that we have a set of faculties that are functioning properly in order to know anything. What I'm saying is that we have to know that we have a set of faculties that are functioning properly in order to know that the theory of warranted true belief is a true and valid theory of knowledge. That's what I'm saying we have to know for the purpose of. So we don't need to walk around saying, well, I know that there was a car accident down the street because I just saw it and I just heard it. And in order for me to know that there was a car accident, I have to know that I have cognitive faculties that are functioning properly. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that we have to know that we have cognitive faculties that are functioning properly in order to know that the theory of warrant is true. And we don't go around wondering whether the theory of warrant is true on a daily basis, but philosophers are trying to establish that as a valid theory of knowledge. is a valid path to knowledge. I think it is a valid path to knowledge, but only if determinism is false. See what I'm saying?
I'm trying to, but no. So okay, let me put it this way. Let's pretend for the sake of argument that theistic determinism is true, right? So God is the one. He designed our faculties, and let's take sin out of it. Forget about the fall. Let Adam and Eve in the garden. God designed all of them and their faculties, in a suitable environment to functioning properly to produce, and they with faculties successfully aimed at producing true beliefs. So let's see. Yep, they see an apple that creates perceptual evidence that they're privy to, and that in turn activates a warranted true belief. There's an apple in front of me, and they can know in an experiential knowledge kind of way that they are warranted, even if they never form necessarily a propositional belief. Oh, I am warranted. Like maybe they've never heard the word, but they know that they know they have knowledge by acquaintance, that they have knowledge that there's an apple in front of them. And another way we today understand when we break up knowledge, that's another way of saying they have knowledge by acquaintance that they are, or experiential knowledge that they're warranted, kind of thing. So that's how the process works. And I think it's the same as what you would say, what you're, like with, you would just want to add in justification there because it's fully internal, right? Does that make sense as to what I'm saying? Or
Well, yeah, but I don't think there's such a thing as experiential knowledge because the idea of experiential knowledge automatically assumes that we have the cognitive faculties that can translate that experience into knowledge and make it so that the explanation of that experience is a valid explanation, that there's justification behind that knowledge. But if determinism is true, then all of that is short-circuited. If theistic determinism is true, that means that God is the cause of all of our beliefs. And so if God is the cause of all of our beliefs, then we did not arrive at those beliefs through some kind of cognitive faculties that are functioning properly. All that is bypassed under determinism. Under determinism, the direct and efficient cause of my beliefs is that God supernaturally caused me to believe it. And if that's the case, rational justification or rational deliberation or any kind of exploration or experimentation or analysis is all bypassed. None of those things occur under determinism. We are caused to believe what we believe through the supernatural intervention of God, period. That means that there is no rationality. There is only causality. And if everything that we believe is caused, it doesn't matter whether it's believed it's caused by God or whether it's caused by natural law. It doesn't matter. It's caused. The belief has been caused, and if it's been caused, we have no idea whether it's true or false. And we know that because human beings disagree and contradict each other with their beliefs. So one person believes that Denver is the capital of Colorado. Somebody else believes Denver is not the capital of Colorado. Okay, one of those beliefs is false. But if both of them have been caused, then the cause of that belief is unreliable because the cause produced a false belief. And that's why my argument is so important. The argument on the naturalistic side is that if naturalism is true, then determinism is true. And something external to ourselves caused all of our beliefs. If something external to ourselves caused all of our beliefs, then it caused all of our false beliefs. So if the cause of our beliefs can produce false beliefs, and we know that it does, because people disagree with each other, they contradict each other. So we know that the cause of that belief produces false beliefs. If that's worthy. if that's the case, it is untrustworthy.
Yeah. So
Oh,
again, that's what. Oh, are you okay? Go ahead. You cut out.
and if that is the case, we have no way of knowing whether any belief that has been caused in us is true or false. Because the same cause of my belief is the same cause of somebody else's belief that contradicts my belief. So the same cause produces contradictory beliefs, and if it produces contradictory beliefs, it produces and causes false beliefs. Because if you have two contradictory beliefs, one of them has to be true, the other one has to be false. They can't both be true, and they can't both be false. So we have no way of knowing whether any of our given beliefs are true or false under determinism, because our beliefs have been caused by something that we know causes false beliefs. And we have no idea which of those beliefs are the true ones and which of them are the false ones.
Okay. So and I'm realizing I'm being a bad David here because I'm kind of so let me put it this way. I think that you're wrong if we have theistic determinism, which I disagree with, right? I don't believe that's true, but I'm for the purposes of the debate, if I'm adopting that, then I'm able to bite the bullet and say no, even if it's fully determined by God, I can have a determined, warranted, true belief, and that's knowledge. And we also have experiential knowledge. I mean, I would point to babies. They know things, but they don't have any propositional knowledge at all, kind of thing, or animals, and stuff like that. So, and even myself, look, I know experientially that I'm feeling angry long before I form in my head, oh, I'm the proposition, I'm feeling angry today. So
Yeah.
there is experiential knowledge. There's also properly basic knowledge, right, which doesn't require rational deliberation. So that's not a necessity for knowledge in all cases and stuff like that. Kind of thing, right? Rational deliberation is not a necessary prerequisite for knowledge. That's what I wanted to say there. But here's where I realized I've been doing a bad job because I've been arguing under theistic determinism, and I'm supposed to be arguing for natural determinism because that's where atheism comes. And on that front, I would agree with you that, look, like, without any kind of ontological reason to trust my knowledge by acquaintance or experiential knowledge and propositional knowledge, these are all produced by natural faculties produced through some kind of evolutionary process where the goal is beliefs fit for survival, not truth. So if I'm arguing from the atheistic perspective, I agree with you. I've failed. I can't get to knowledge even with this process that I've set up. It's only if I'm positing God has designed us, and I'm talking pre-fall here to keep things simple. I think that would work. And after the fall, we know people come to false beliefs because their cognitive faculties are corrupted by sin. Most people on earth are not so corrupted. They know in a properly basic way 1 + 1 = 2. It's obvious. You're a fool if you deny it. But there are some really smart fools out there who deny it. It's called fuzzy logic. They say, well, I don't know that 1 + 1 = 2. They're wrong, but that's because of the effects of sin. So their faculties are not functioning properly when they say that, basically.
Yeah. I would just, I guess, to follow up on some of those things, I would say first of all that my experience, I cannot know under determinism whether it's theistic or materialistic, naturalistic. I cannot know that I'm experiencing anything under determinism because my belief that I'm experiencing something has been determined by antecedent conditions. In other words, my belief that I am experiencing something has been caused. And so you can't say that I can have direct knowledge from my own internal experience of something. Because if determinism is true, then your experience is determined just as much as your beliefs are. And you have a belief that you are experiencing something. If that wasn't true, then the whole thing would fall apart. Experience wouldn't matter if you didn't believe that you were having an experience. So you believe that you experience things, and if determinism is true, your belief that you are experiencing something is determined, is caused. And it suffers from the same disease that determinism produces, whether it's theistic determinism or whether it is naturalistic determinism. Because if God causes all of our beliefs, that's what theistic determinism is. God causes all of our beliefs, and they could not have been otherwise. If that's the case, God causes our belief that we are experiencing something. And if God causes all of our beliefs, he causes all of our false beliefs. And so even if it's God who's causing our beliefs, we still have no way of knowing which of them are true or false, because any given belief that we might have could be one of the false beliefs that God is determining us and causing us to believe. And we know that we have false beliefs because human beings disagree with each other. I believe something, you believe something that contradicts what I believe. And we both can't be right. One of those propositions is false if we contradict each other. But if God causes both of them, then he causes false beliefs. And if God causes false beliefs, then it's impossible for us to know which of them he's causing are false, because he causes all of them. And so I don't think you can escape the destruction of knowledge, even under theistic determinism. You can only apply circular logic and say, well, God would not cause us to hold false belief because that would make him a deity of deception. Well, but he does cause false beliefs if theistic determinism is true.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. So that's correct. I'm assuming free will after, in terms of the fall itself or whatever. But yeah. So by theistic determinism, I guess I'm just saying, in the limited sense of creating our knowledge producing faculties, or our warrant faculties and stuff like that. That's the only restricted set, and then it works. But
all right. Well, if you're going to say that, then don't call it determinism, because that's going to introduce just a massive level of confusion into the conversation.
Gotcha. Okay,
because
let me go away from that entirely. Okay. Yeah, you've been talking a while, so let me just. I've got to represent the atheist here, so I'm trying to come up with a natural thing, and that. Okay, so let me put it this way: clearly, there are things in the natural world that are beyond our understanding and stuff like that, and even though we know that our cognitive and noetic faculties, as well as any belief producing faculties, were produced through an evolutionary process, and the primary goal of that is survival of the fittest and that sort of thing. That's its primary aim. Number one, you could argue, an atheist could argue that, yeah, but that's coincident with them being also focused on producing true beliefs, because true beliefs are correlated with best fit for survival beliefs overall in the grand scheme of things.
Okay, I would dispute that. If that's what the atheist wants to say, I would dispute it right away, immediately.
Okay, so so would I, as a theist, kind of thing. But there is, you would admit, trying to do my best here, that you would admit that there is sometimes a correlation that obtains. Like clearly, if you see a tiger and you got to run away from a tiger who's coming to run at you, then yeah, it benefits you to have the true belief there is a dangerous animal running towards you, therefore run away. So there is often.
But we're not talking about true beliefs. We're talking about justified true beliefs.
Sure.
Those are two fundamentally different things. And not only that, but beliefs do not have to be true to be a survival benefit. False beliefs can also enhance survival and support survival. So I might have a belief that behind every rustling bush, there's a predator that wants to eat me. That's a false belief, because the wind can make a bush rustle and make noise. And so if I believe that every time I hear a bush rustling, that it's because there's a predator behind it, causing it to rustle, causing it to move, that's a false belief. But that is going to enhance my chances of survival. Because what I'll do is I'll run away from every rustling bush. And if I run away from every rustling bush, I'm going to run away from a bush that has a predator behind it. And so my belief that behind every rustling bush is a predator is a false belief that is helping to guarantee my survival. So it is simply not true that true beliefs enhance survival or promote survival or support survival. Simply not true at all. The fact that they are true and that they help in survival is simply an accident. And an accidental true belief is not a justified true belief, so it's not knowledge. And what we're talking about is whether or not the naturalism can actually cause us to know things, not just to believe things that are true. Those are two different things, completely different things.
Yeah. Like I said, modify the tiger example to be justified true beliefs, but I think your objections stand on that, obviously. Okay, last thing, and I want to bring up Brian, but okay, so let's posit some sort of intelligence then, not just some random natural, non-intelligent force. So in the natural world, it's possible that there could be aliens out there that created life on Earth and maybe other planets or something like that, and they were the ones who designed our faculties to produce warranted or justified true beliefs within a deterministic universe and stuff like that. So they were smart enough to work with the laws of nature and design things so that we could produce warranted true beliefs, even though they were determined. Those conditions could still be fulfilled. Is there not? Is there? I know you disagree with even God's ability to do that, but like, I don't know. Is there, outside of those kind of objections, if it were possible for God to do it, could it also be possible for aliens to do it, kind of thing?
Well, so you're saying that aliens created us? They have the power to create life on Earth, and that they have the power to give us rational faculties and so on?
Yeah, at the very least, the latter. They gave us the ability to come to knowledge, kind of thing, whereas animals don't have propositional knowledge.
Okay, so they're not actually causing us to know things. They're giving us the ability to rationally deliberate and therefore arrive at justified true belief through our own cognitive faculties.
Yeah, but this is all within a deterministic world. Like everything they did was determined, and yeah.
Well, then they're not giving us the capacity to reason and to rationally deliberate. Because if they're determining our beliefs, then that's not rational deliberation. You can't have determined beliefs and rational deliberation at the same time. It doesn't work that way. But if the aliens created us and created our ability to rationally deliberate and arrive at justified true beliefs, then that doesn't solve the problem of naturalism. It simply relocates it. Because my question would be, are those aliens necessary beings, or are they contingent beings, and were they created by something? Because if they're contingent beings, they're still part of the natural world. And therefore, we have no way of knowing whether or not those aliens exist and whether or not they actually created us and gave us rational powers. So if the atheist wants to bring that up as an objection, I would say, well, the objection fails because you're still within the realm of naturalism, still within the realm of natural law. You're talking about aliens that are subject to natural law. How do we know that the aliens know anything? Because unless they are the necessary cause of all of existence, then how do we know that those aliens know anything And how do we know that those aliens know enough to be able to create beings that are capable of rational deliberation? You see the problem? See, if the atheist wants to bring up aliens, it doesn't solve the problem. It doesn't move the needle. All it does is kick the can down the road.
All right. We do have some questions in the audience. So one from Brian. I'll start with Brian. He's saying, isn't cause and effect just the same thing as determinism? Are the effects not determined by the causes?
Not necessarily. Because a cause can create an effect, but if the effect could have been otherwise, then the cause is not deterministic. Would you agree with that, Dale?
Yeah, well, so in the way that he's meaning it, like, yes, I would say yes, that the law of cause and effect is the same as causal determinism, right? Whereby what we're meaning is the cause is fully sufficient to bring about its effect. But what Phil's saying is that, yeah, there are times when certain causes only play a partial role. So they're insufficient to bring about a given effect, at least in part. You know, they maybe they'll bring about that effect when working in conjunction with other partial causes or something. So in terms of the law of cause and effect, that's usually thinking of a fully sufficient cause. In that case, yep, that's causal determinism. But there's also, bear in mind, partial causation and stuff like that.
Yeah, sometimes people will treat cause as influential, but not necessarily determinative. So here's the distinction. I always go back to the definition of determinism. The definition of determinism is that antecedent conditions are sufficient to necessitate all effects. And the idea that a cause is sufficient to necessitate an effect is not determinism, it's determination. So when you say, is cause and effect the same as determinism? The answer is no, because cause and effect is not the definition of determinism. But cause and effect could be the definition of determination if you wanted to treat it that way. And if you want to say that the cause brought about the effect, that the effect could not have been otherwise, then what you're talking about is something that was determined. But that's different from determinism. And I always want to make sure that we keep those two things separate. I'm talking about whether or not naturalism produces determinism and whether or not human epistemology is possible under determinism. Now, that goes beyond the mere discussions of whether or not a belief that I hold might be caused. It could be caused, but it could be caused by me. It could originate with me. And so if you want to say that it was determined by me, then that's great, that's fine. But that's completely separate from the systematic known as determinism. And that so I would say that no, cause and effect is an insufficient definition of determinism and is not the same as determinism. It may be involved in determinism, but it's not the same as determinism. Would you agree with that, Dale?
Yeah, well, I said what I think, kind of thing. Yeah, I wanted to go to Rembrandt. He's a skeptic, and he's kind of asking a mocking thing. He's just saying people making up stories are the antecedent conditions, and that comment was posted when we were kind of mentioning the fall and the story of God creating our faculties and stuff like that. So that's the context of what he's saying there. I don't know if you have anything you wanted to respond to him as a skeptic.
Well, they could be antecedent conditions. People making up stories could be the antecedent conditions for a lot of things. The question is whether or not those antecedent conditions are sufficient to necessitate an effect. And Rembrandt doesn't say anything about whether or not whether people making up stories were sufficient to make it so that someone has a belief and that belief could not have been otherwise. So it doesn't come even close to being relevant to the discussion of determinism. What say you, Dale?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm in full agreement with yourself, right? Like, I think anything, intrinsic or external, can play the role of an antecedent condition and play a role in a causal chain that leads to knowledge, either partially or fully. So, yeah, look, the story of Genesis has caused me to believe a whole bunch of things, to come to knowledge of certain other things. I learned propositions, and then through derivative knowledge, I derive or logically infer other things that are logically entailed from that. So that, I mean, stories are just a set of propositions, and there are certain logical entailments from that. So, yeah, that's kind of the whole basis of philosophy and logic 101 there, right? Like, we call them premises in philosophy, but really stories and arguments are sets of statements or premises that allow you to logically infer a conclusion or not. So yeah, there's no problem with stories. Now, in terms of him saying, well, they're just made up, therefore they're just false, and there's no warrant for believing the stories are true. Again, even there, his question's so general, it doesn't matter. Even, I mean, we make logical entailments from fictional stories all the time. So even fictional stories can serve as antecedent conditions for knowledge in some cases, right? Like the story of, is it the scorpion and the fox or something, or maybe something else. There's a moral lesson there that can be derived. So yeah, cool.
Yeah, but I think what we're doing is we're learning something through a story. And so I wouldn't call the story the antecedent conditions for my knowledge. I would just call them that these are something that inspires a belief in a particular moral principle. And whether or not that moral principle is true has to be verified by something other than just a story that caused me to believe it. So we're talking about the differentiating between the cause of a belief and the justification of a belief. So a moral story can cause me to believe in a certain moral principle, but doesn't justify that moral principle. And if that's the case, then we can't say that I obtained knowledge because I read that story. You know, I obtained knowledge of some kind of moral principle just because I read that story, and the story articulated that moral principle and illustrated it for me. You know, that give me knowledge. That just inspires a belief that still needs to be explored and still needs to be verified. So, and the other thing that I would say about, oh, go ahead.
Well, I'm going to be asking a related but different topic because I'm interested in your take on that. So if you've got something to finish off on this, go ahead. But
I just wanted to make a comment about conditions.
Okay.
There are two different kinds of conditions. There are necessary conditions and sufficient conditions. And so to illustrate that, there are three sufficient conditions and three necessary. Let me just draw the analogy here. In order to have fire, you have to have fuel, you have to have heat, and what's the third? There's three conditions for fire, and I can't remember what the third one is.
Oxygen.
There, thank you. Dale, the scientist, has come through for me.
No, so, you know what it is? I use that example when I used to teach my philosophy students in critical thinking. So I would always use that as an example here. So there you go.
Yeah, those three are the necessary conditions for fire: oxygen, fuel, and heat. But any one of them by itself is not a sufficient condition for fire. So heat is not a sufficient condition for fire in the absence of oxygen and fuel. Fuel is not a sufficient condition for fire because heat and oxygen are absent. And so when we talk about conditions, we talk about the necessary conditions or the sufficient conditions. So there are certain conditions that need to obtain in order for knowledge to be possible. And in antecedent conditions, that is not in the category of the typology of conditions. That's simply where the condition existed inside of a process. So a condition was antecedent to something, to something or other, and it may have been posterior to something else. So an antecedent condition says nothing about the necessary condition or the sufficient condition. It only locates the condition in a process. It doesn't actually modify the modality of that condition. And so that's just another reason why saying that people making up stories are the antecedent conditions for something, it doesn't do any philosophical work. It doesn't do any logical work at all, because you need to discover more about those conditions to know whether or not they are necessary or sufficient for people having certain knowledge. And so if somebody makes up a story, it's irrelevant. The story could be true, the story could be false, the story could carry a justifiable moral principle, or it could carry a faulty moral principle. It doesn't matter. So there's just the observation that people making up stories are antecedent conditions for certain beliefs. It just doesn't do any work. It really doesn't move the needle. Doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't help. It's not helpful at all. So that's what I just wanted to say that about this comment. And we can move on.
So it's related but slightly different, and I'm interested in what your take is. So if we forget about making up stories, testimony as evidence, right? So people testify to certain things or certain events. I'm kind of curious. So there are different positions in the epistemology of testimony. There's a reductionist position, and if I'm going to bet, I think this is the position you take, but I'm going to ask to make sure. So you're saying testimony, like making up stories, we don't just believe that. We don't have a justified true belief on that basis alone. We need independent justification in whatever form, empirical evidence or logic, or however you gain justification. But testimony in and of itself, being presented with testimonial claims, does not give one a justified true belief. There's the other side, a non-reductionist stance, which I take, which says testimony in itself is a basic form of evidence. It is to be believed unless and until you're presented with sufficient defeaters or something like that. So, but it sounds like I wanted to ask where you stand. It sounds like on the former for you, right?
Well, I think both of those can coexist. I don't think that they are mutually exclusive. Because you can say that testimony is not enough to give you justified true belief. And what you might mean by that is that testimony has to be tested. That untested testimony is insufficient to give us any kind of justified true belief. And so if we just say testimony is not enough to give us a justified true belief, that's incomplete. It's not specific enough. It doesn't do any work for us. But what I would say is that testimony is sufficient to give us justified true belief if, and only if, it is put through a series of tests. And one of the best tests for establishing the reliability of testimony is defeater elimination. And that is exactly what I'm talking about in my new book, The Knowable Resurrection. In The Knowable Resurrection, I'm arguing that the testimony of the apostles is sufficient to give us a justified true belief that the resurrection of Jesus Christ actually occurred. So we can know it occurred on the basis of their testimony, not by simply accepting the testimony at face value without investigating them. but that if you investigate the testimony and put it through the standard tests of defeater elimination, then you can arrive at justified true belief on the basis of that testimony because it's been tested and you've eliminated all the defeaters. If you eliminate all the defeaters, what you arrive at is what I call organic, rational certainty. Because it's not about showing whether or not it's reasonable to believe in a specific proposition. It's about establishing through the elimination of defeaters whether it is rational to disbelieve in that proposition. And that's what I show in my book, The Knowable Resurrection, is that we can know that the resurrection occurred based on the testimony plus the test of eliminating all live defeaters to that proposition. So I would agree with both of those sides of that debate, but I would only agree with the first side because it's incomplete. If it is presented as complete, that testimony alone, without being verified, without being tested, then is enough to produce a justified true belief, then I would say no at that point.
Yeah, so they are exclusive. The non-reductionist says, no, you don't do anything to verify it kind of thing, right? All there is the absence of proven defeaters. Is that, and I believe it or not, so there's another difference. But
Dale, let me interrupt you real quickly. The absence of proven defeaters is not the bare acceptance of the testimony. It is if you discover that there is an absence of true defeaters or live defeaters, then you've actually gone through the process of testing that testimony.
So here's what I would say, right? So here's an example, and I think you would again appeal to practical stakes maybe, but it's when I get testimony, I ask somebody for directions on the street, and they give me testimony. Oh, it's down the block. I don't do anything to go, oh, are there any defeaters? Can I trust this guy? I just believe him, and 9 times out of 10, I've got knowledge in that case. I've got a justified, under your definition, I've got a justified true belief.
No. You do not have a justified. You do not have a justified true belief. You just have a true belief.
Okay, whatever you say. Yep. Yeah, it's your view. Okay. I was trying to give my view, but
you have a belief that turned out to be true.
Sure, whatever you say. Yep, you're right.
Sorry, I didn't mean to be rude.
Yeah, just let me finish, then you can refute me, kind of thing, right? Okay. Yeah, and this is what a lot of philosophers, experts in the field, Jennifer Lackey, Liz Jackson, they all agree with me on this, and I think it's our common experience, right? When I told you my name was Dale, you didn't do anything to say, oh, are there any, let me test that, let me verify that. Is that true? No, you just believed me. And you, guess what? That's my name. You have knowledge that my name is Dale. That's true. That's right. That's a justified true belief kind of thing. Now I'll shut up and go ahead and tell me why I'm wrong.
No, when you tell me your name is Dale, I don't have justified true belief. I don't have knowledge. I simply have a true belief. And I have a belief that I have no reason to doubt. But that's not knowledge. To have a belief that you have no reason to doubt is simply a belief that will probably turn out to be true. And if I give credence to that belief and make decisions based on that belief and start calling you by the name of Dale, then I am perfectly justified in doing that. That doesn't mean that I have a justified true belief. That just means that my response to that belief is justified. In other words, I'm justified in calling you Dale because you told me your name was Dale, and I have no reason to doubt that your name is Dale. I have no reason to believe that you were lying to me, and therefore I make a decision to call you Dale from now on because you told me that was your name, and I have no reason to believe that you were lying to me. But that's not knowledge. That's simply a true belief. It's simply a belief that happened to turn out to be true, and that I wasn't surprised. And you could also bring probability into the mix, into the conversation at that point, because you can say, if Dale tells me that his name is Dale, then it's highly probable that his name is Dale because I have no reason to believe it, and he would have no reason to lie, at least not that I'm aware of. And so, but somebody could tell me their name was Dale, but their name was really Frank. That could be their given name and their birth certificate, and they're telling me that their name is Dale, and they're lying to me. That's not really their given name. Then, if that's the case, then I might have a belief that person's name is Dale, and it might be probably true, but it's also possibly false. And if that's the case, I don't have knowledge. I just have a I have a belief that is most likely true, and that's all I need. I don't need to have knowledge that your name is Dale, and I don't have knowledge that your name is Dale, but I have repeated confirmation, or what appears to be repeated confirmation, and so I don't go to bed at night wondering if your name is really Dale, because it's not that important. If it turns out that you've been lying to me all this time, that your name really isn't Dale, then I haven't lost anything. There are no consequences to me believing something that turned out to be false, because that doesn't have any impact on my life. But whether or not God exists and the resurrection is true, those are things that have severe consequences, that I can't afford to be wrong about those things. And so I can't be satisfied, and I can't just be content to believe that these things are true, even though I might not know that they're true. Because if I believe that something is true, but there are live defeaters to it, and there is some kind of doubt that still lingers, then I'm in trouble, because I could be believing in the resurrection and it might not be true. I could be believing in God and it might not be true. And if I'm going to stake my eternal destiny on those propositions, then I have to know that they're true. But I don't have to know that your name is Dale. And I don't know.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, I just wanted to get your take on that. I disagree with your take, but I understand yours is the majority position. Yours is, I would even argue, the common sense position in philosophy. But when I took my grad seminar as part of my master's, I was a reductionist, but I was convinced by the powerful reasoning of people who took a different thing. So I changed my mind on that kind of thing in terms of how we treat testimonial evidence. So yeah, I was interested in what your thoughts were. So I appreciate that.
Okay, so you disagree with me. So you disagree that my belief that your name is Dale is not a justified true belief, that it is simply highly probable that it's true, and that with every day that goes by that it's not contradicted, and that it's not proven to me that it's false, I have a higher probability that your name is Dale, but I never arrive at justified true belief that your name is Dale, because there isn't enough justification for me to know that your name is Dale. There's simply enough justification for me to believe that your name is Dale, and that belief is likely true. So if you think that that's wrong, then give me an argument that refutes that position. I don't want you to just say, Phil, I disagree with you. I want you to tell me why, and I want you to give me some logical argument that refutes what I just said about whether I have justified true belief that your name is Dale.
Yeah, because testimony is evidence in its own right? Like when you have a perception, you have a justified true belief that you're seeing a pen that's blue. Kind of thing. It's the same. When I'm presented with testimony, that is evidence in favor of the given proposition, unless and until you have reason to think that it's defeated or that it's not true. So the whole claim of the non-reductionist is that testimony doesn't reduce to needing other justification from other evidential means. It is a basic unit of evidence, just like perception is, just like my memory is. I don't need any other justification. It confers it directly upon my faculties and stuff, right?
Okay, well, what you're doing is you're restating a proposition. You're not giving me an argument that supports the proposition. In other words, when you say evidence, that testimony is a form of evidence and that it can be accepted and that it can produce justified true belief, you're not giving me an argument that that's true. You're just saying that that's true. I'm not hearing an argument that establishes the truth of the conclusion. Testimony is evidence, and it is sufficient evidence because I am unaware of a defeater. Because there's a difference between being unaware of a defeater and investigating everything and knowing that there are no live defeaters that can overturn that testimony. And that's the problem that I have with a lot of people who say, I have justified true belief based on testimony because I'm not aware of any reason to doubt it. That's very, very different from saying I have investigated it and I have destroyed all the defeaters. And now I have arrived at justified true belief because of the evidence plus the elimination of defeaters. Simply not being aware of the defeaters is not the elimination of defeaters. It simply isn't. And so I am not aware of any defeaters that your name is Dale, but that doesn't mean that I have justified true belief based on your testimony that your name is Dale. Just your testimony itself is not sufficient evidence. It may be evidence, but it's not sufficient evidence until I close all the loops.
Well, yeah. So that's what I'm talking about, is that there are no defeaters, provable defeaters, kind of thing, and that's what the non-reductionist position is. It's the same with memory. And when I ask you what you had for breakfast and you use memory as your evidence, you just go, oh yeah, I had eggs, and you have knowledge that that's what you had. It doesn't matter that there are cases when sometimes you have false memories. 9 times out of 10, it's correct, and we do have knowledge when we remember something. And you don't need to go out, well, how do I know I'm justified in my memory? Stuff like that. You don't actively try to search out all the defeaters. It's there, kind of thing, right?
Okay, but the problem is that when people offer historical testimony, they're not giving you testimony of what they had for breakfast that morning. They're giving you testimony of something that they saw and heard that was external to themselves. And so if you say there are no defeaters to a given proposition that was the content of testimony, then that could mean two different things. It could mean I'm not aware of any defeaters, or it could mean I have investigated all of the live defeaters and I have eliminated all of them. Now, in the first case, you don't have justified true belief simply because you lack awareness of any defeaters. In the second case, you do have justified true belief, but it wasn't based on evidence or on testimony alone. It was based on testimony plus the validation of that testimony through the elimination of all defeaters. So that's why I'm saying I can't accept the idea that your testimony is necessarily sufficient to give me justified true belief just by itself. It can't be testimony by itself. Testimony is not evidence unless it is verified through the elimination of defeaters. At that point, the testimony is evidence because it has been tested and it has passed the test. So if you think I'm wrong about that, give me an argument that says,
look, perception. It's the same thing with perceptual evidence, right? When you have a perception, when you claim to know that you're seeing anything that you're seeing, whatever you want to, I don't know what's in front of you right now, your computer, kind of thing, right? First of all, let me ask you, do you believe there's a computer in front of you right now?
Yes.
Do you know that there's a computer in front of you right now?
I think I can. I think that yes. I think that all the defeaters to the proposition there's a computer in front of me can be eliminated, and have been eliminated. But that is a little bit different than than testifying to something that occurred in the past. My computer sitting in front of me is in the present. When people give historical testimony, they're testifying to something that has occurred in the past. And therefore, their testimony has to be verified through a much more rigorous process than what is required for me to tell you that I know that there's a computer sitting in front of me.
Yeah,
Stakes are a whole lot higher.
Okay, okay. So forget about perception. Going back to memory, I ask you directly, and you testify to me what you had for breakfast. So this is memory is your evidence, kind of thing. Do I need to require you to go to get a CAT scan to make sure your memory's not, you don't have Alzheimer's, you don't have any problems, or do I have knowledge right now that you at the very least probably on a balanced probabilities had what you said for breakfast, kind of thing. I know.
No, you don't. You don't have knowledge that I had eggs for breakfast.
Okay. Do you have?
You have a true. You have a. I have knowledge that I had eggs for breakfast, but you don't. You have. You have a true belief. You have a belief that is highly probably true. You have a belief that you can rely on because it is so probable that it's true, and it's so improbable that it's false. But I could tell you that I had bratwurst for breakfast this morning, and I could be lying.
Right.
So just me telling you what I had for breakfast this morning does not give you knowledge, does not give you justified true belief, because I could be lying.
No, but yes, but I mean, you could be misremembering, you could be misperceiving. So pointing out that there are falsification times doesn't falsify the evidence, right? So
okay,
we follow the evidence on that. Yeah.
But whether or not I could be misperceiving has to do with my knowledge. It has nothing to do with your knowledge, because you're telling me that you can have justified true belief that I had eggs this morning because I told you that I did, and that's based on my memory. Based on my knowledge. You don't know that it's based on my memory because I could be lying. So you don't have justified true belief that I had eggs this morning just by me telling you that I had eggs this morning. And you don't have to go through, I don't have to have a CAT scan for you to eliminate the possibility that I could be lying, or that I could be confused, and that I might be misremembering something. So the point is that you don't have justified true belief based on my testimony that I had eggs this morning.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, I think
I'm with Jennifer.
Pardon me?
I'm just saying.
Okay.
I disagree. You're a testimonial. I guess. Yeah. Reductionist is your.
Okay, but again, if you want to disagree, you need to tell me why. You got to give me an argument that refutes my position.
I told you what the evidence is, and I'll post up papers. You can read those and read what Jennifer Lackey has to say.
So okay, so you're appealing to secondhand philosophical positions.
Yeah, because
okay,
because we're at the 2-hour mark. I was trying to wrap up, and
that's fine.
I wanted to ask for your opinion, and I got it, and that's it. Like
Okay.
I said, I'm going to say I disagree.
Well,
I don't have to explain myself.
Okay, that's fine, and we can pursue that more offline, because it's really kind of off topic for today. I mean, the whole idea behind what we want to talk about today was whether or not knowledge is possible if determinism is true, and we've deviated from that subject matter to a substantial degree, what I'd like to do is bring us back to the original topic, and I think what we should do is, what I really was thinking about was inviting Juan to come on in the place of David, but I never actually thought about that until it was too late. So maybe Juan might have been able to come on. If I could send him a link to come on the show, then maybe he could have come on. I don't even know if he's still here or not. But anyway, that's where the main argument lies for this particular show. And if we want to discuss these other topics about justified true belief and knowledge and memory and those kinds of, what Lackey has to say and so on, then we could devote a whole other podcast to that. And because we've only scratched the surface on it. And if you'd be interested in having that discussion and more fully, then I'd be happy to do that. And it would also give me time to consult some of the literature that you're referring to. So,
and same here. Like I said, I wasn't prepared to debate. I was supposed to be a moderator today, so that's why I need to go back and read what she says too. So yeah, but yeah, the answer is yes. I'm willing to debate it, but I need to be prepared, and I'm not prepared right now.
Yeah, so. and I'm not necessarily saying that we should have a debate. I just think we could have a more fruitful discussion, possibly if you could present those arguments a little bit more clearly, and instead of from secondhand, instead of saying go read a book, I have constantly tried to avoid the argument of, hey, if you read this book, you'll hear the refutation, and it's just doesn't really get us anywhere. So putting it off to a separate discussion would probably be the most productive thing to do. So
yeah, like I said, I'm going to post the papers, so I would recommend you read them. I'm going to be posting up papers that support your side as well, so that'll help us prepare, and we can do a discussion.
Okay, cool. Well, for anybody who's still listening, we may have lost a lot of people, on the show here just because we started rambling on and we got into the weeds. But in case anybody is still listening, I would like to recommend some reading about this topic. And if someone that is in here, earshot of my voice right now is only able to take in one book, then the book that I would recommend would be The Epistemological Skyhook. That's by Dr. Jim Slagle. I think it is the most powerful argument against naturalism and its ability to produce epistemic reliability. But if you don't have time to read a long book, then I would like to be self-serving and recommend my book Machines Don't Laugh, because I have my variant of this argument that's well articulated in that book, and I also articulated in the book Calvin's Desperation, because again, my central thesis is that determinism destroys epistemology no matter what flavor of determinism it happens to be. And so that's where I would point you if anyone wants to investigate this matter any further and would like to do more reading on the subject. And if anyone has any questions, then we could do a follow-up to this discussion, and we could do a follow-up with David Johnson, by the way, who was originally supposed to be on the show. And during that follow-up, we might be able to discuss some questions that somebody might have after reading some of this literature. But the book Miracles by C.S. Lewis is also a great resource in investigating the problem of naturalism and epistemology. And then you can also read Tim Stratton's paper that he wrote with J.P. Moreland on an articulation and defense of the free thinking argument. I'm not sure if that's I think it's an explanation and defense of the free thinking argument that he wrote between the two of them. And so Tim Stratton's free thinking argument is very close to this argument that we're making today, and it's another member in the family of arguments against the epistemology of naturalism, or in naturalism. So that's kind of where I would leave it. And Dale, if you have any closing thoughts and comments, then go right ahead and give them to us.
Yeah. So I want to I guess I want to thank you, Phil, for doing this and that sort of thing. Because I know you're obviously going to be disappointed that you were supposed to have sort of a debate and discussion, and that person didn't show up due to a mix up. So that's not fair to you. So I do appreciate that you did me the favor and you showed up. So yeah, that's great. Um, kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, I look forward to doing a future discussion where we prepare on the epistemology testimony. Like I said, it's a fascinating issue for me. So let's do a future one when we're both ready to debate in debate mode, kind of thing, or discussion mode. In terms of today, wrapping up. So yeah, I think the key difference that we kept coming back to is this notion of that if the conditions for knowledge, whatever it is, justified true belief or warranted true belief, are in any way caused by something external to oneself, then that's not knowledge. That somehow nullifies justification or warrant from coming about. And I think that's the key difference is I do see it. I don't see any contradiction between a determined warranted true belief or a determined justified true belief. So I think that is really the key fundamental thing that kind of differentiated us as we discussed each of my three objections. Now, in terms of the topic of the debate proper, again, it wasn't about even theistic determinism or having a theistic lens. So on that front, I do think you won the point against me as the fill-in for David. I don't think appealing to aliens or some kind of naturalistic determinism provides one with a justified true belief or with a basis for a warranted true belief. So yeah, I think I would have to say you won against me as the substitute David on the taking the atheistic determinism route kind of thing. So yeah, that's my summary on that.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I would recommend my book, The Knowable Resurrection, because it says a whole lot about testimony and the value of testimony, whether or not historical testimony can produce justified true belief. And in this case, specifically in the resurrection. So I think you would be very interested in what I had to say about that in my book. I can send you a PDF copy of it, and that shouldn't. I do have a few things that I need to add to it, and also Dr. Craig Blomberg has agreed to write a foreword to my book on the resurrection, and so I'm going to come out with a new edition of that book, not necessarily an official new edition, but kind of like an informal behind the scenes update to the book that's going to include the foreword by Dr. Blomberg, and then also some of the additional comments that I'm going to be making about human testimony and so on. So that's it. I think that's a good place to stop. And I really didn't want this to be a debate today with David Johnson. I really wanted it to be more of an informal discussion where I knew that we would disagree, that I would disagree with David, and so on. And I'm not disappointed that he didn't show up. I'm not upset or resentful or anything like that. Completely understand. I've had times when I haven't shown up to something because I thought it was a different day and my calendar was inaccurate and everything. And so, it's all good. It's no big deal. And I would like to just have an informal discussion. I think informal discussions are a little bit more productive. I think sometimes debates can be a little bit too dry and a little bit impersonal. So yeah, we have lots that we could talk about in terms of theistic determinism and its impact on epistemology. And we have a lot to talk about with Dave Johnson once he joins us in a kind of as a follow-up to this show. And so I'm looking forward to all of those things. And so thanks you for your closing comments, Dale. And we're almost at the 2.5 hour mark. So I'm going to sign off and say thanks for everybody for your patience. Thanks for listening. Thanks for subscribing, and hit that subscribe button if you haven't. Also, I want to recommend that you subscribe to Dale's channel because it is rich with incredible, powerful content. And so I highly recommend that you follow his channel and subscribe and follow what it is that the work that Dale is doing, because it is.
It's so good. He just got. Oh, there he is. You got cut. You got cut off. So yeah.
I know. I know. I was waiting for it to come back so I could continue my sentence. I was just saying, everybody subscribe to Dale's channel if you haven't already. I think that the people that are watching are already subscribed to your channel, but have them tell. I mean, I hope they can tell their friends and recommend to their friends that they subscribe to Dale's channel as well. So,
I just
you're
want to
doing
say
great.
we did have on your channel. We had Jamie Russell back because I remember we were talking about him the other day. So it was good to see him back, and a bunch of other people as well.
Great. Yeah, great. All right. Thanks, everybody. And remember, Jesus is Lord. Follow him no matter what the cost. And we'll sign off with that and say goodbye.